What is going on, everyone? Welcome to another episode, Conspiracy or Just a Coincidence. I am Jack Allen. Go follow me if you're not at Kojak Podcast. But tonight, as a very frequent guest, but we haven't talked in a while, so I always try to get Oddman on when I can, at least once a month, to talk about our latest readings and research. So, Oddman, welcome. How are you doing today, buddy?
Hey man, I'm doing great. It's great to be on with you. And yeah, man, it's been too long since we've talked. And
Yeah.
gosh, the news cycle has went crazy ever
Oh,
since. It's always going crazy now. But yeah, I've been looking forward to talking to you.
so did you get your Trump mugshot T-shirt yet?
No, I didn't, but I think they're selling like hotcakes from what I hear.
Oh,
I've seen it
dude,
on everywhere.
they're the and I think it's always like a pipe dream, but I'm sure I don't know if you've seen the clips, like when he was driving through Atlanta to get to the courthouse, or maybe when he was leaving. He was like, they're like driving through the hood, and it was like all these black people outside, cheering for him. And I keep seeing like more and more like rappers and um like in like those street interviews, like of black people saying like, "Oh yeah, Trump, Trump, Trump." And I can never, and I feel like that's like the GOP wet dream. Like, this is the year that if we're going to say voting's legitimate, this is the year we'll get more than the 8% or 10% of the black vote that we have all gotten for the last 60 years. This is
Hmm.
our year. And I know it's probably just selective manipulation or whatever, but I do find it like interesting just how excited conservatives get every time they think like, yes, now we got them, they're going to vote for us this time, this is going to be it.
Oh
But
yeah,
did you see that clip of him
I
drive?
I didn't know.
It's
I've
like a
got to look that up.
real short clip.
Yeah, I've been noticing like the uptick in people, I guess, kind of the MAGA people kind of praising him again on social media. It's not quite as fierce as it was in 2016, but it's kind of interesting because you probably saw it, but like on Instagram, I keep a lot of screenshots on my phone just so I'll have them like an
Yeah.
idiot. My phone's just filled with literally like 3,500
Oh,
screenshots
you'd be put on a list immediate or thrown in jail if they found that phone. But continue.
immediately. But I was looking through, I just like went in, you can search. I just searched Trump and it pulled up all these and just dumped them into a folder. I started looking through all the headlines and I was like, I kind of had to refresh myself because I realized, okay, this is another thing that was a reason why I didn't support him. This was another thing, and
Yeah.
it added up. And I was like, holy crap, there is really a lot of things that he did that was very anti-conservative, but they had no idea because the liberal media and the libs were hitting him so hard
Yeah.
that like nobody would like the people that liked him could not, fathom that they couldn't admit that he did anything wrong. It was kind of funny.
Yeah.
And so I don't know, I'll never know, I guess, if it was like a plan or there's just aspects of it that seems so almost like an operation or something, like a propaganda or operation, but it may just be the way people's minds think with the two-party system, you know?
What did you watch any of the GOP debates, or no, not really?
I didn't watch any of them.
Yeah.
I actually kind of looked around, 'cause I don't have cable and I was like, where do you watch this? But I couldn't find anywhere. Um, well, I think you had to like join some Fox site or something. I was like, I'm
Yeah.
not going to put my information in there.
No.
But anyway, no, I've just seen a couple clips since then, basically with, oh gosh, I forget his name.
Vivek or whatever.
Him and the lady,
Oh yeah, what's her Nikki Haley?
Nikki
Oh
Haley.
my
Yeah, yeah.
dude, and it's just so fun. Like, and I think most people are like waking. That's a one positive with social. I like see even like the boomers like posting like World Economic, because he just got funded. He made all his money with like a rug pull and a pharmaceutical. He pumped the stock, then he dumped it, it crashed. Soros and stuff like that, but it's just so sickening, like the ability these people have just to lie blatantly and just to they'll say whatever. They will
Yeah.
just say whatever, and I'm sure they've done that for such a long time, but it's just like it makes you like sick. you know?
Yeah, because their words mean absolutely nothing. But then a lot of these people still manage to get thousands and thousands of supporters, and it's kind of depressing when you kind of look around at how easily the people are fooled after all this time with all this information at our fingertips.
Yeah, dude. Yeah, and it's not even like I still, if because I still like vote, and I know Trump's like he's not on our, but it like forces you to choose a side. So if you're like maybe, and I'm not a high IQ person, but if your brain can't get past that, you can see how easy you're just going to keep falling into this paradigm and this hope and this believing and this blaming others or whatever. Oh,
Yeah.
that's that person's fault. That's why this happened. And
Oh yeah. Yeah. And you like we witness on Twitter, it's like kind of the perfect place to kind of watch in real time people that are very well educated, very highly educated, and they still fall into these traps, whether it's usually supporting the Democrats, but yeah, they still fall into it. They just
oh
turn
yeah.
into like children who are fighting over, it's like I used to say, it's like my daddy can whoop your daddy. It's like it really is that kind of childish at times.
Dude, I mean, I don't know what like I read I'm sure you brought up I did read that book Confessions of a DC Madam. I can't remember who wrote that,
Mhm.
but it was his story. His Twitter filled with supporting Nancy Pelosi, filled with supporting, hating Trump. Douglas Valentine, who wrote the
Oh yeah,
Phoenix
yeah, yeah,
program, he's the same way, dude. His
yeah.
Twitter, it's in like I would be embarrassed. Like Douglas, you did such an amazing, like I couldn't even like his Phoenix program book. I couldn't even finish because it got like too military straight, got beyond like what I could like comprehend.
Mhm.
But just talking about the corruption of the CIA and all this stuff like that. And even him, like he's just this huge anti-Trump hater, but supports the left. And it's just
Yeah,
like just it boggles my mind. It makes me like wonder what would like the first conspiracy researchers that we put on a pedestal that we love to read their, like what would they say today? Like would they, because I think most of them at the time were probably more left leaning. What like would they see through this? Would they,
mhm,
that it's scary though, like that
yeah.
someone like these amazing authors who I respect so much, they can't get past it.
I've noticed that too. He's a real shit lib, and I mean, what else can you say? I mean, he falls for that, that left right paradigm. And, and it's like, man, come on. You can look at all these people on the left side of politics, which I think the way they justify that just from watching people like him, and I'm with you. I mean, his book on the CIA is fantastic,
Yeah.
but they kind of justify that as, oh, those were not real liberals, the ones that were doing all this horrible shit, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think that's how they justify it in their
I
heads
see.
because the way I hear them talk to each other and their tweets and stuff like that. That's the only thing I can think of because
That's
it's
fair.
so blatantly obvious that these people on the left too are, they've been a part of this whole corruption for so long.
Yeah. I Dude, I guess that yeah, yeah. Well, to get it, because I always say I'm like the worst at current events, but those are like the last few things that I could think of that just popped up. But you prepared heavily. We've briefly talked on this subject before, but you prepared heavily for a show that will be rescheduled on someone else. But we wanted to talk more Fabian Society, and I told you I've been reading this series, History of Civilization, so I can, since I know nothing and I'm learning more and more about the Age of Reason and all these, the Enlightenment and all these things. But yeah, so like, what are for, just in case if anybody doesn't know what the Fabian Society is, what's the Fabian Society?
Well, they were a group in England that started in 1884, and basically it was kind of the end of the Victorian era. So you had all these kind of upper middle class kids, brats, early 20 somethings, um, who had kind of grown up around a lot of money and a lot of wealth, a lot of these well to do people, and they resented it. And there was all kinds of clubs and reading like reading clubs, different things like that. The Masons, of course, just all these different organizations. They would gather. Sometimes people would call them parlor clubs or whatever, because they would gather in parlors and they would talk about books. And so, long story short, there was a couple of these guys that were friends, and they decided to start a club, which eventually turned into the Fabian Society. And the Fabians, it's named after I think he was a general. At least he was in the military, and his name was Fabian Maximus. He was known for beating Hannibal. Hannibal was like one of the great warriors, warrior
Mm.
generals or whatever. And Fabius, he decided that let's wait him out. And so he was able to wait out Hannibal's army. And that's where they got the kind of name. And their logo is, or was at least, the turtle. So slow and steady wins the race.
Mm.
So
Interesting.
they liked Marx. They liked this guy named Thomas Davidson, who was a kind of a quasi socialist philosopher. They liked John Ruskin, who was Cecil Rhodes' mentor and
Okay.
professor. I think Ruskin, it seems like a lot of people really looked up to him. And he was kind of a early socialist too. And I think he taught at Oxford and stuff like that. So anyway, they decided to form their club, and immediately they decided, hey, let's start making pamphlets, and let's start doing debates with our ideas. So right away they were like, we want to, our two main things are basically to get with the unions and also to control education. And which really reminds me, there's so many similarities between them and the Bavarian Illuminati once I started, kind of delving deeper. And they were 100 years later, but I
Hmm.
do believe that they took some of those ideas and definitely applied them. So
Yeah.
anyway, you had the most famous people in the Fabian Society was George Bernard Shaw. So he was like a playwright. He wrote books and stuff like that. And then there was this couple, Beatrice and Sidney Webb. And so they were the three main Fabians for a long time, kept it going. But immediately they started trying to kind of like hobnob with these like upper crust kind of quasi liberals at the time and people that were in government, in parliament and stuff like that. And they did a pretty good job, because right away they befriended one of the Rothschilds. I forget which one it was at the moment, but they also got funded by this other guy who was he's like a German Jewish businessman who died and decided to leave all his money to the Fabians to start a socialist college, which became the London School of Economics and Social Sciences.
No way. That's hilarious.
So the Fabians started this college, and it's like really big today. You don't ever hear about the Fabians, but I think the London School of Economics and Social Sciences is still pretty big. And so, anyway, if anybody wants kind of get an idea of like who comes out of the London School of Economics and Social Sciences, you had George Soros, David
Ah.
Rockefeller, um, RFK Jr.
Oh,
Oh,
oh.
you also had people like Mick Jagger, which I thought was really weird. Who else? Pierre Trudeau, Justin's dad, or not his real dad, of
Oh,
course,
interesting.
right? So people like that have come out of the London School of Economics. Bertrand Russell was one of the professors there for a long time. And I think he was like one of the presidents of the college. They've had
Right.
like four no, excuse me, Rothschilds who've been presidents of London School of Economics. I think the last one passed away, so I don't know who is the president there now. But another weird connection to the London School of Economics is the he's known as a libertarian, but the Hayek, von Hayek, I forget his first name, but uh,
Hmm.
you hear about the Hayek Society and stuff like that. And apparently,
Okay.
there's like you've got the Mises, libertarians, and then you've got the Hayek libertarians, and the Hayeks are like the Reason magazine. So there's kind of a
Ah,
competing,
okay.
yeah. But Hayek was a long time, I think 10, 11 years, he taught at that socialist college, which I think is really weird because he's known as being opposite of all that.
Right. Right.
Um, the Huxleys came into it. Both Julian and Aldous became Fabians. Of course, Aldous known for Brave New World and the Doors of Perception and all that. He was like tight with the royalty, and I think tight with MI6, MI5, whatever at the time. And Julian started UNESCO, so he was huge. And all of these people, except for maybe one or two, all the main Fabians were huge eugenicists. So they were big into depopulation. So,
dude, I just looked up graduates. Gaddafi was also got a PhD at the London School of Economics.
Really?
Yep, 2006.
I'm thinking a couple other famous Fabians. This one blew my mind, and I thought that it kind of there's no solid evidence, but I'll just kind of give it to you. So Eric Blair, aka George Orwell, was a Fabian for a while, and he gave speeches at the Fabian Society and stuff like that. And it's kind of well known that he was a socialist even up until I think the point of his death or whatever. But apparently he had a break with the Fabians, and a lot of people say that 1984 was based on what he thought would happen if the Fabians actually got power like they wanted, because they started in 1884, and that would have been their 100-year anniversary.
Ooh, that's
so
interesting.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
Another Fabian that was very famous that, and I'm learning more about him now, H.G. Wells. He was famous for like a ton of books, and they made movies into them and stuff like that. But he had written a book in, I think, 1909 called New Worlds for Old, if I remember correctly.
I thought it was almost New World Order, but yeah, there's something like that.
Well, actually, he wrote that
New
book.
Worlds for Old, yeah.
And then I think like maybe 30 years later, he wrote New World Order and the Open Conspiracy. Like all three of those books are just basically handbooks on how to create a one world socialist government.
Wow.
But the interesting thing is he actually had a falling out with the Fabians too. And he compared them to Machiavelli. He just thought they were ruthless. He wanted to kind of revamp it, reform the Fabians. And he thought that he knew how to kind of make them better and more efficient. And like the older Fabians, like Bernard Shaw and the Webbs, they were like, no, we control this. So he had a falling out. And then, in his biography, his autobiography, it's like a 2-volume set. He's got this whole section about the Fabians, and he still was a socialist in his later years, but like it was very interesting. I had no idea that he had written, like, he basically did a takedown of the Fabians in their version of socialism and how it wouldn't work because it was like a too utopian. And, he kind of went into detail about he said they didn't think things through. They were kind of like idealists and stuff like that.
Interesting.
So it kind of reminds me of modern day socialism, because there's a lot of that utopianism in that too, especially with the younger people who really don't know anything about it.
Well, that makes me feel a little better because, not about Shaw, because Jay Dyer always will post George Bernard because he has that one famous quote or in his book, and it was written like 1920 or something. I'm sure you know it, how George Bernard Shaw says that in 100 years, we will be the regular folk will be eating slop and bugs and garbage, while the elites or the powers, they'll be having real meats, real foods, while we'll be having these chemical, just slop. And
I think that was actually Bernard, or the other guy. I mentioned him before. I'm blanking. Oh my gosh, I'll think of it in a minute. He did the Impact.
You don't think George Bernard had that quote?
I think it was somebody else. I think it was. I'm blanking on the guy. He was a professor at the LSE. I'll think of it in a minute.
All right, but you let me know. I won't argue with you on
no.
There, but
I could be wrong, but I think that I'll think of it in a minute. But Bernard Shaw had some like really harsh quotes, and another thing I learned is that he and the Webbs, the couple that were the other kind of power players behind the Fabians, they actually traveled to Soviet Russia, and they wrote books about it. they wrote a 2-volume set about Soviet communism and how it was great. And they actually talk about in their own books, the Webbs and Bernard Shaw, how Fabianism is communism. And Bernard Shaw, he even talked about how he's got this book called On Politics. And he said, and I haven't read the books, but he said that Lenin actually wrote in his books, even talked about Sidney Webb, the other guy, because this Webb guy wrote all kinds of books about communism and socialism. And supposedly Lenin actually admitted that he got a lot of his ideas from Sidney Webb. So, that was another thing I had no idea about, because, like the Russian Revolution, was it 1918? Is that right? Or
19, I think. But yeah, right
um,
around there. Yeah.
but and the Fabians at that point had been around since 1884, so they predated all that. So it kind of makes sense, that because they were writing so much that those works would get out. And so, yeah, I mean, Bernard Shaw, he's got another quote that basically it talks about how in their idea socialist world, if you didn't work, you would not eat, which is,
Mm,
I'm sure a lot of young socialists would be a little bit upset at that.
absolutely.
They might not admit
Absolutely.
it, but I think they would be pretty
And
upset about it.
man, you were right. I should never have doubted you. I'm getting him confused with Bertrand Russell.
Bertrand Russell.
There we go. So
Well, it
Flippy.
starts. It's the BER thing, right?
Yeah.
Y'all. That's why I was blanking on it too. I was like Bernard,
A
Bert,
very similar name, but thank you,
right.
Flippy and Skell. You guys didn't let me down. I appreciate it very much. And manufacturing reality. Look, you guys all knew it. And I
Oh,
will
that's awesome.
take the blame there on that wrong one. But do you think what do you know what grew where they grew out of? Because the 18, I'm trying to see. I in my of course my series that I'm reading, that history of civilization. I'm not like that's like the Rousseau and Revolution. That's like enough. That's the title of that one. And I'm not as interested in that one. So I didn't get that far. But do you know where the Fabians may have grown out of? Or was it just just like educated, similar beliefs, like just a group of a similar class people?
I think it was that. I think it was the time when the Victorian era was kind of winding down, so they were like they wanted to get back at those people because I'm sure there was a lot of just decadence and stuff like that, during that whole period. And I kind of feel like they were kind of rebelling against their parents and grandparents, and
Okay.
and they did like Marx, Darwinism. They were influenced by a lot of these things that were going against the grain, going against the church, of course.
Yeah.
They even said in before they started the Fabians, they said we want to start an organization that's Christian without Christ. They
Hmm.
had all these ideas. In fact, they had another organization before the Fabians called I think it was called the Fellowship of the New Life, and it was based on this Tommy Davidson guy's. He had this idea of the new life, and it was kind of a quasi-socialist, almost utopian kind of idea. And so they did that for a while, but like some people wanted it to be spiritual, almost religious, and other people just wanted it to be political. So they kind of split off there. But
Interesting.
another thing that's interesting, I think, about the Fabians is they started a magazine called The New Statesman, which is still going today. So, it's like you don't hear their name, but I feel like that they still have a lot of influence. The UK Labour Party, they didn't start it, but they reformed it. It'd been around a few years. It started to fail. And Sidney Webb and Beatrice Webb were known for writing all these socialist books, and they asked them to come in and help with the Labour Party. And they were big on unions anyway. So they reformed the Labour Party. And now you got Labour parties that basically the Fabians created in New Zealand and Australia. I've even read in China. I don't know if that's still true today, but all these different countries, they've got the women Fabians, the Fabian youth. At
Ooh,
one point, they had Fabian summer schools for kids. So, you know what I mean? I feel like they've been very influential. And one of their things, Bernard Shaw said that their strength was their anonymity. Like hardly anybody knew them. I just thought
Mm,
they were a debating society. Like if you look them up now, like the official website just says they're, I think it says they're like a think tank, basically a think tank, a
nice.
policy
Yeah.
institute.
Right. Right.
So
What was and I don't know if you were mentioned the Fabians or did you say they were instrumental in education?
yes, they got a lot of their policies passed through Parliament. And in fact, Sidney Webb, the co-founder, he was in Parliament at least twice. So they were able to. They were like friends with all these like these big shots. Like Lord Lothian was one.
Mm,
R.B. Haldane. These guys were huge in British government. If you start looking
right.
back at it,
Right.
uh, did I say Lord Rosebery? I'm not sure.
I don't
There were
think so.
several
Yeah.
lords. Lord uh, Lord Lothian, if I didn't say that.
Good job on the names, dude. Nice.
There's so many of them. Another one, Harold Lasky, was like this kind of Jewish activist type guy who I believe was a professor at LSE at some point, and he was apparently like one of the most influential socialist types of that era. So they were, he was one of their guys, and he helped them out a lot, and he had connections to JFK and people like Bernard Baruch and
Oh, he's a good guy.
right.
Yeah. Yeah.
The other guys, Judge Frankfurter and Judge Brandeis. So they all had that click and that connection to America. And
Interesting.
I think that you'll think this is pretty interesting too. So speaking of their connection to America, they had another connection that was I thought was pretty interesting. There was an organization here known. They didn't call it officially the American Fabians. They called it the League for Industrial Democracy, and it had been the Social Democratic Institute, I think, before that. And the two main guys who are known for that are John Dewey, who is the father of American education,
Hmm.
who taught at the Columbia School, and Walter Lippmann. And Lippmann is like all over. Like he was connected to the British government, he was connected to American government. He was kind of the Edward Bernays before Bernays. He was already writing books about how to control the public's mind, even before, excuse me, before Bernays. He had a book called Phantom Public, and I think another one was called maybe Public Opinion or something like that. But he was with the Chatham House and CFR and all that. So those guys, like if you read you can find on archive.org, you can find a bunch of the League for Industrial Democracy's books and pamphlets and stuff. And they actually, in the books, they call them the American Fabians a lot of times. So,
Well, I just wanted to bring up the school thing because
yeah,
we people like boomers, they're infiltrating the schools and they've been doing that, dude, for the last 400 years. I mean, that
yeah,
wasn't like a revolutionary idea. The Jesuits, the Protestant, I mean, all these religious groups in Europe since the, 1600s or whatever, when they started really pushing literacy and things like that, they all came up with it. They're like, wow, you know what we should do? We should get the kids. And just like they're trying to do now, if they were, it was a Protestant country and you're Catholic, they'd steal you from your Catholic parents with Protestant, I mean, so this idea of indoctrinating the youth is nowhere. It's it's a tale as old as time.
right. Yeah, you're definitely right about that for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
and they were pretty bold in some of the Fabian writings about, especially Bernard Shaw. That guy was apparently he was very cunning and he was a likable character, but he was a real bastard at the same time. And he talks in some of his writings about taking the kids away from the parents. I mean, he was pretty bold about it. They actually thought that the kids should be taken away from the parents at like age 2 or something like that, and brought up, in a secular environment by the state. I mean, they
yeah.
were internationalists too. They wanted a global government, global socialist government, and they they liked some parts of the League of Nations, and they actually wrote a couple of books. I think one, or not books, but white papers. I think one is called the International Government, and they gave it to some of the people that were trying to form the League of Nations, like Edward Mandell House, who was Wilson's, I
Yeah.
guess his assistant, or basically the brains behind the Wilson administration, from what I can understand. But yeah, it's like they have their fingerprints everywhere. And I may have mentioned this on the one show we did a long time ago about the Fabians, but I thought this was really interesting for those that don't know. So, of course, the Rockefellers gave the land for the UN building in New York. And David Rockefeller went to the London School of Economics. He did his college thesis on Fabian socialism. And so, right across, as far as I can tell, there's a neighborhood, a community across from the UN, and it's called Turtle Bay. And so, it's this community,
Oh,
and all these Fabians moved over in the early 1900s and kind of made it their own little thing. And it's got a little turtle on the gate. So, you had people from the New Republic. I think that the couple of the editors from the New Republic, which is basically socialist,
yeah.
they moved there, and different people like that. So there's another connection to the Fabians
And
and
I
the
don't this
UN.
is totally, like, probably doesn't relate, but so, I only read this 'cause, I'm trying to read Korean history because my wife knows zero, she's culturally white, and so I wanna, and so I was reading about, and so turtles are in, like, Asian culture, except for Korea, it's a bad animal, because the reason why it's a bad animal is because I guess they abandon their youth.
Oh
And
wow,
so, and I just found that, I don't know, just throwing that out there, that it's interesting. Fabians, education, evil
yeah,
proponents of stealing children, and turtle is the mascot. When that's, so it's viewed as like a bad animal in most of Asian culture because they abandon their youth. They I don't know. I guess they
wow, yeah.
lay the egg and just let them go or something. I don't know what they do, but so I don't know if
That
that
is
relates at
interesting.
all. But yeah.
That's almost too big of a coincidence, right?
Right. Right. See, even Annika said turtle is an insult in China. Yeah. So I found, yeah, but I'm, maybe it relates, maybe it doesn't, but
Oh,
it's funny.
another one of their famous, the LSE's famous alumni is Tony Blair, and he was the big shot. They worked with Bush. I guess he was the PM of the UK during
Yeah.
the when 9/11 happened. So
Right.
he pals around with the Clintons, and he's just an evil ghoul.
Oh, so evil. So evil.
He's actually turning into a ghoul. The last couple of pictures I've seen of him, I was like, oh my god, dude! But he deserves it.
Oh, yeah.
And yeah, he wrote pamphlets for the Fabians. And you can find they have done such a good job ever since 1884 of keeping all their pamphlets, and you can find them all on PDF form in on the LSC website. So you can read all their platforms on education, on I mean, you name it. On they were big about wanting to unionize everything. They wanted to know that they were huge on. They wanted to get rid of private property. That was one of their main goals. And so that right there, of course, is a utopian idea because it's, then you've got these bureaucrats who basically will own the private property,
Right.
So, that would never work for very long. But
Well, and
yeah,
I
they were,
guess, oh, go ahead.
no,
Sorry.
no, no, go ahead, please.
Well, I was just gonna say, and I feel like it's, because that's always something that I struggle with, is this socialistic, these people like them in the Fabians, they want this socialistic society, and and boomers today love to say socialism, communism here, but I'm gonna steal Anthony Sutton's quote, how it's not this. I don't think, and maybe you could elaborate more, but it doesn't. I don't think that's the same socialism that these key people in Britain were advocating for, compared to what we have today, which is this corporate socialism where it's not the government that controls everything, but corporations.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's kind of hard to tell, but they were chummy with, the top Fabians. They were chummy with, like I said, the Rothschilds and different people like that. And so it was kind of like, I kind of feel like it was or it was a socialism for the people, but not for the Fabians. You know what I mean?
Okay.
I kind of feel like they kind of had that limousine liberal attitude, maybe not as bad as like modern day liberals, but they certainly were well connected. And yeah, they just wanted to build this state. Control the state would be in control of everything. Of course, they
Mhm.
would bill it as being fair and
Right.
equal and all these things, but then who saves you from these mighty bureaucrats? So
Well, and that, I don't know if this like really relates, but it just is like the hypocrisy or double standards, like we always talk about on the right, the freedom of speech, how important that is. And then the left will use that as justification why you can't silence, all this pornography or all the, and I'm trying to think of the point I'm trying to make. I don't know what the point I'm really trying to make is, but it's just, they use they use these phrases and catchwords to kind of confuse people into supporting things that gets out of hand or gets totally out of their control. I hope that
Mhm.
makes sense what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, it does. Yeah, it makes you really, I mean, their their intentions are not as good as they try to present them, you know?
Right. So the point is like free speech. If you want to do these degenerate things, that that's where they'll use. But hate speech, now that's evil. That is not considered free speech. And then what is hate speech? What's that slippery slope that's just going to continue? I think I don't know if you saw like how Europe. I don't know if it was the EU. They just passed this thing that if social media, if there is hate speech on your website, you will get fines from the EU if for you to as an incentive to monitor this better, to watch this better. Um, so
Wow.
that's terrifying.
That's
Obviously,
coming. Yeah, I
yeah.
think it's probably coming here, don't you think?
Oh yeah, I think Brazil. I saw they voted like homophobic hate speech now imprisonable 3 to 25 years
Jeez.
of some. And again, like what deems homophobe? What is that? What's
Mhm.
your definition I'm sure there's not. I'm sure it's a very loose definition. A lot of wiggle room there and loopholes of what you can say or cannot say.
Right, yeah. Oh my god. Um, yeah, it's crazy, and of course, you're talking about we're kinda like leaning towards kinda corporatism. It seems like that's kind of the way the world is kinda leaning, with but then, like, these you can never convince these young socialist Democrat types, even though their party is so entrenched with all these huge corporations, if not outright, then through the corporations, NGOs. And so it's like it's so obvious, but people don't only see what they want to see. And of course, the Republicans the same way. I will say, just two nights ago, I found another alumni from the London School of Economics, and I think this one was important too. It surprised me, and I keep talking about that college because they are insistent. They formed that college to train the future socialists of America. So you can see that with, David Rockefeller, and people will say, well, he wasn't really socialist, but he pushed socialist ideas. And then, of course, same with, George Soros. I can't remember his first name. I'm blanking on it right now. I think it might be Keith, but Rupert Murdoch's dad went to the London School of Economics and Social Sciences, and I was doing a little bit of background on him, and they supported a lot of liberals back in the day and stuff like that. So,
Oh, dude, yeah. And I'm sure this or I've talked about this, but just the FDR's New Deal. I mean,
mm,
they had literally came up with that fake assassination plot that who I forget. I don't know if they said J.P. Morgan's people were trying to kill him or something like that. Because of his New Deal. But these were the guys that the Rockefellers, the Morgans. I don't know if it was JP. I think JP Morgan is probably dead at that point. I don't know. I can't think. But these are the people that funded, that sponsored these bills, not because they wanted you to have health insurance, but because it was cheaper to give you some health care instead of training somebody new, and it eliminated competition. Because now if you're a startup company, you can't afford to pay health insurance for people. You can't afford to do all these new rules in 1933 that are, I think some of them they would eventually get dropped, but a lot of these things, they were just to eliminate competition. And I think there was a quote, I can't remember who it was, but somebody very close to the FDR administration, like one of the fat cats, his quote, and I don't know, I want to say it was like a Vanderbilt or someone like that. They said like how we need to graduate past this dog eat dog world, and we're wasting resources that way. Something like that. Something,
yeah.
sounds like you could say that today just
Oh
as
yeah.
well. But I just found that just some, because people, the left or whatever, people champion FDR as this guy who, trying to help at the Great Depression he brought us out of and all this stuff like that. No,
Yeah.
I think he was one, and I don't know, was he Social Security numbers? Was that it started with him?
I can't remember. That would make sense though.
I think it did, and again, that was, was used to say, "Oh, no, it's so you can get your when you retire," but no, it was a move to help identify and monitor how many people we have in society, and,
Yeah.
it's amazing how, yeah, 1936 is when Social Security numbers were first issued. Um, but yeah, it's just so many of these, and so yeah, so many people still on the far left or whatever. I love like how they think they're fighting the system, but they're supported by this, and they don't see that at all.
Yeah.
They can't make this connection.
Yeah, they're propping up the system in a lot of ways, and like these guys, these very powerful guys, they always hide behind good deeds and philanthropy, Tikkun Olam, whatever you want to call it. What is it? The Masons call it oh, I forget now. Anyway, uh, you were talking about the New Deal
Yeah.
connection to the Fabians there.
Oh,
An
nice,
American Fabian, Stuart Chase, wrote a book called The New Deal, and that's where Roosevelt got the name for the New Deal.
nice, very good,
So
very good.
that all ties in together. It's
Well,
just
I don't know much about Huey Long besides that he was assassinated, and I think isn't his quote like "every man a king," but like he was like a populist, and history probably no one even knows who he is, and I'm sure if beyond that history maybe views him unfavorably, but he hated FDR. They were both he despised him. He thought he was a disgusting human being. In Sutton's books, it talks about how FDR was, he raped and pillaged post World War One Germany with his company AIC. I mean, just the Roosevelt. I think they made
yeah,
their money on opium trading. Just this family of blue bloods, and yet, but this is the man of the people. It's just
yeah.
amazing how things. And I'm sure I say this till ad nauseum, but they're exact. They're the same they were then as they are now. They're exactly the same.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's crazy because these guys, these families that have got this generational wealth, and they earned it, by dishonest deeds and their ability to, have use the government a lot of times to go in and do things in these other foreign countries, to be able to make more money and to set up shop and to give loans out, ridiculous, loans with this crazy interest and stuff like that. So yeah, these guys, and they still are doing it. It's almost like, really, I think politics, and this may sound like a cliche, but I think it's more aligned with the mafia than actual, the original idea of politics. I mean, there's so much going on in the background that it would just blow the people's minds if they knew half of it.
Well, it wouldn't be shocking. I don't know. The mafia is literally propped up or was propped up by the government, so I'm not surprised that they share many similarities with each other.
Right?
They,
Yeah. I mean, it's like basically a lot of the things that they've done is just overseas, especially too, is just like the mafia on a bigger scale. They go over and they take over, they set up shop, and
dude, there's so many similar, and because I'm doing that. I'm about to be done with the book, but the Politics of Heroin book, and I read it before about the mob being propped up by governments, and I think we talked about this last time how they were all about to die. They got revived by the CIA and all these $1 million of funding. Um, oh my gosh, the point I was trying to make, we were talking mob. Uh,
just about the government supporting those type of things and being
yeah.
behind
Oh,
them.
and just like how this is not a new concept at all either. The privateers of Queen, the Virgin Queen and all that. I mean, the government has utilized criminals or these gray areas to exact vengeance, steal wealth, plunder, cause chaos in foreign countries, to steal foreign wealth for, again, now what, 500 years. I mean, like, this is these the government and criminals have always been linked super close together. The only
Mhm.
criminals that get arrested are the ones that they now don't have a need for, or they didn't have links to the government, so they have to arrest those ones.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, the sanctioned criminals are fine, but the people that
Yeah.
go off and try to do their own thing, that's not going to be tolerated. And I kind of
Uh,
think that's what the deal is with Trump. I mean, I'm not saying that, he's doing all kinds of like shady things. I don't know. I haven't looked into it deep enough, but we know that he's had, mafia ties for a long time. You couldn't be in business, I think, in New York at that level and not have, ties to organized crime at some point. And so, but anyway, I think that's maybe one of the reasons he wasn't in the club. I think a lot of people, and I don't mean to change the subject, but it just kind of
No.
been on my mind lately. It's like, we're given such simple, this is left and this is right. Pick one and then die on that hill. And that's kind of like what people do, right? But politics, as you know, probably better than anybody, it's like, you look through history at how complicated it really is, how layered it is, and the connections and all this stuff. And it's not just as simple as left, right. There's all kinds of stuff going on in the background. The left are connected to the right, and, people you would think would be on the right are connected to the left and vice versa. So it's like, it's so complicated that the average person, they can't fathom that. They don't have time for that. They just want to be told by Tucker or, I don't know, Rachel Maddow, whoever's big on the left now. I have no idea.
Yeah.
What to think, basically, to, kind of reassure them of what they already suspect. And then they can kind of belong to something, and they
Yeah.
don't want to have to dig in. And because as soon as they find out, they do start to research and they find out, oh my God, Trump's connected to this, or I don't know, Tucker's connected to this, or whoever, it doesn't matter. Then they're like, I'm done. I don't want to hear that,
Right.
so
Oh yeah, they shut it down, dude.
yeah,
And
yeah,
I get it again because it's hard. Like it's so hard. It's difficult. You don't, and especially I think it's really tough for the older generation who maybe in the last 2 years has realized, wow, like I don't know who to trust. And so if this guy that I like, Dan Bongino or Tucker, and I'll look past these things because they at least say some things that I agree with. But I mean, it's brutal. I think that the boomer generation has been eviscerated by this awakening that, oh my God, what's real? What is the media not lying to me about? What are they telling me the truth about? And yeah, I find it like really interesting to see that with the older generation when I hear them say things, at work or whatever, parents and stuff like that. It
yeah,
like kind of brings a smile to my face.
yeah. It's very interesting. I mean, to see that, because they're a lot of them, they're close to being like, okay, it's just all BS, and but they can't. A lot of them, they can't quite go that far just yet. Some of them have. I think a lot of people have just given up, and they're like, oh, it's so
I
bad, I don't even
agree.
want to think about it.
Agreed.
But yeah, that's got to be tough, man, because you get up, what, 60, 60, 65, whatever, and you thought that at least there was one part of America that was still patriotic and supported the people and all this stuff. And then you start to, you know, all these things are being revealed, that a lot of stuff's been released through declassified documents, and it's like, it's just hard for people to understand. I
Well, dude,
mean,
even the viral song that Oliver Anthony guy or whatever,
mhm,
they ain't. And I
yeah,
liked the song, I thought it
yeah,
was good. And and then like I see his post now on, he's like backtrack, he's like a buy or it seems like he's like trying to push away from the GO, which I get. Yeah, I wouldn't want to be associated with the GOP, but he's like backing away from these values that all these people attributed. Like finally somebody speak like for us. Yes, these are my
yeah, yeah,
issues. And then you just rip that out from him. Like look at
yeah, yeah,
he's a liar too. His
yeah,
past is not like past in the sense of like criminal, but past of political beliefs or what have you. It's just such a it must be so like I think a lot of like people like us and people in the chat who've been reading and researching all this stuff, like we just kind of laugh about it because
yeah,
we've like already cried about it. We like if you don't laugh, you would go insane. You would just be so sad. But
yeah,
I think a lot of these older people and newer people, they're at that stage where they're just oh my, they're heartbroken. They're
yeah.
devastated.
Yeah, it's like Kid Rock, what was it, like last week or a couple weeks ago that somebody said he was drinking Bud Light. I don't know if there were actual pictures or video. I
I think
guess
he
there
was
was.
selling it at his bar for sure. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
see, none of these people are real here. I feel like if they're in the spotlight, chances of them really standing up for what's right is going to be so slim, because there's so much of a pull for them to be the other way,
Right.
money wise,
Ab-
advertising wise, all
right.
that. And
Absolutely.
it's,
And I can like see, and I was just talking to my friend about, because he was asking me about Joe. He was like a normal guy, asked me about Joe Rogan. And he's like, is he being censored? And I told him, I was like, dude, these guys, no, they're not censored. Like, they'll make it seem like they're censored. They'll make it seem like they're hated, because they keep you in that box where it's socially acceptable to question things. You're
mhm,
allowed to say this and this. You can't say that, but you can say this or this. And that's why they focus on even people like the Tates and all these people, that they're not saying anything that's outside the paradigm of like, outrageous, or maybe have beliefs that I have or you
mhm,
have. They keep you perfectly right here, where it's like
yeah,
just an easy back and forth. You can't groom children. You're grooming children with heterosexuality. It's
yeah.
whatever the topic may be.
Yeah, I thought that it was interesting. Probably mentioned this to you before, but like, I still try to listen to a little bit of talk radio just to kind of like be able to see what they're pushing,
Yeah.
and so I noticed like during the whole, the whole poke, when it was like the at the worst, the lockdowns and these things,
Yeah. Yeah.
and talk radio, like mainstream conservative radio, they were going so hard against the masks, but they were still promoting the jabs. And it was like, this is a perfect example of the mainstream conservative radio and punditry
Right.
as a whole, because that's what they do. They're like, look, we're fighting against, these masks, these
Right. That's a
tyrannical
great example.
Democrats, and it's just like, and it made me think, too, that like I listened to all these talk radio guys for a long time, and they barely ever covered anything except surface level stuff. Like the Democrats suck. Look what they're doing, which is fine to a degree. But I mean, especially now, we don't even have to have anybody tell us how bad the Democrats are. They're horrible, disgusting people, tyrants. They want all your freedom so they can
Yeah.
sit back and cash in. And I mean, so, it's like I never learned about the Federal Reserve. I never learned anything hardly historical listening to, conservative talk radio. It was
No.
so shallow.
So shallow. Yeah, it's just current event. It's just current events, like this basic. It's just such surface level stuff that, like men shouldn't be in girls' bathrooms. Okay, yeah, you're right. But are you like? But yet you are championing Blair White. I don't know if you know who
Mhm.
that is, but
Yeah. Yeah.
okay, or whatever. Whoever, Richard Grinnell, all these stuff. Like, uh, if you would say that you were conservative and these are your beliefs, even in 10 years ago, you would be they would still look at you like you were insane. I mean, I
Yeah.
always like that 2000, I think it's 2008 Biden interview, where it's right before the election, where he says marriage is between a man and a woman. You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
that was so what 15 years ago?
Yeah.
Like, dude, I mean, it's just pathetic. It's these last 4 years, it's been such a crazy spiral that
Yeah, it's
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 insane.
we're practically in Crowley territory now, just anything goes. I mean, that's what they're pushing, right? It's like it's amazing. Yeah, I'll tell you something else really quickly. Like,
Oh, dude.
I listen to this like Fox show in the mornings. I think the guy's name's Gordon Deal or something. I just listen to it a few minutes while I'm taking my kid to school. And I will say one thing on there. They do these long form interviews. They'll do like a 10-minute interview with one person, which I think is kind of good because instead of just getting little clips here and there.
Yeah.
But it was this Fox News lady, and they were asking her about the presidential candidates, and she was talking about Trump and pro-lifers, and she said, "Well, originally Trump had a real hard time with pro-lifers because he wasn't exactly pro-life. I think he was pro-choice, in fact,
Yeah.
and so they were really against him at first, but now." After everything he's been through with his legal battles and stuff like that, they've come around. And I thought, dude, that's how it happens. That's Fabianism right there. They talk about gradualism and permeation. They slowly work like the Webbs. They said, we don't even want everybody to join the Fabian Society. We want you to go join the liberals and the conservatives and whatever other party and do Fabian stuff while you're in there. And I
Oh,
feel like that's kind of where we're at, whether it's, purposeful or not. I mean, I feel like that all these things have happened gradually, and it's usually, you know how I feel. It's usually like our own party that screws us over the worst, you know,
Yeah.
because we're not looking at what they're doing.
Well, dude, that's such a I did read that book on Catherine Graham, and so I don't know if she started, but she was very involved in like the first like social democrats, now, which is a total communist like college group or whatever. And they had all these people, they had this, and it was right before Vietnam at this point. And they all take I think it's called the Oxford Pledge, where like they promised to never fight in any war. They're all anti-war to the and her husband, he's big in it. I'm blanking on his name right now. Graham obviously was his last name. But anyway, and then the Vietnam War happens, and him, Graham, and all these people that, months, years earlier, just anti-war, peace, love, all these things, just like the Ukraine war, they switched and they refused it. Then the next seminar for this, this comp, which eventually be like a big comp. I think it's social or students for social Democrat. I don't know, but it all changed. It went from this anti-war to, okay, well, we're anti-war, but not for here, because here we're trying to help establish democracy. So
Yeah.
now it's okay. And you see just people, they're so easily guided and pushed. They overshoot you a little bit, but as long as you'll make some consolidations, as like you said, as long as it's your party that did it. Okay, well, yeah. So all right, so LBJ wants to keep bombing him. Well, he's better than the alternative. It's just
Yeah,
thing.
yeah. It's like I said the other day, and it's just both parties, really. I mean, people have been voting the lesser of two evils so long, they're just voting for evil with a different veneer. You know, it's like evil with a different initial beside its name a lot of times, and but you can't convince them of that. They're just so caught up in everything
No,
that
no,
yeah, they would never admit it.
no, dude. And the lat and I wanted to I was because I keep mentioning this series, and I think it's called The History of Civilization. But so I'm learning, I love the kings of Europe, and the one guy, Gustavus Adolphus, he was the king of Sweden. Just like this amazing, he spoke 7 languages, dude. Like at 12 years old, he's like doing he can already speak these people were like the brilliant of the brilliant. He dies in the 30 years war because they're losing this battle, and his whole squad's like just they're kind of like almost retreating, and he picks up the standard and leads the charge into this where they're way outnumbered. He gets shot, killed, stabbed to death. I mean, and his
Wow.
father, even just a war before that, he offered the other king, I think of Denmark, he said, like, instead of our armies fighting, why don't you and I fight to the death, and the winner will be the winner of the war. And I read these
Wow.
stories of these kings of old, and not that all kings of old were good by any, we had the same exact issues, but you just compared that kind of like, you could see how people were nationalistic and could get behind somebody that literally they died defending your country as best interest, compared to what we have today. It's just like, so you have Biden, or what's John Fetterman, and everybody. They're Marjorie Taylor Greene, these
Yeah.
idiots that they can't do anything. They can barely read, probably 90% of them.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I'm sure this is just obvious to everybody, but like, I think everybody at this point knows that Biden and Kamala, they're not in charge of anything significant. They couldn't be. I mean, he's barely making it, and she's just dim as
Oh, they're
can
just
be.
hiding her.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. So, you know, people that still believe the president has this huge power, they might want to think about that. Somebody's controlling it. And I think it's like that all the time. I think that for the most part, they're the face, the main distraction. You know, you think about it worldwide. You know, the American president is a distraction worldwide.
Oh, absolutely.
If he's, especially if he's like Trump, or even with Biden, being uh, senile and saying strange things. I'm sure that goes all over the world. But yeah, it's crazy, man.
He says the craziest shit, dude. The craziest thing. Oh my
Like you're
god.
saying earlier, about certain things that just a few years ago would not have went over at all. Man, and I may have mentioned this before, but I can vaguely remember, and maybe it's just because I've seen videos of it since then, but um, when Reagan was first starting to show signs of dementia, and it wasn't even like now, if you go back and watch it, it's nothing
Okay.
compared to Biden. Nothing.
Okay.
It's like a
All right.
couple of flubbed words, and he gets kind of
Okay.
confused a couple of times. And the Democratic media was going crazy. He's senile. He needs to be out of office. He's not fit for office. And this dude is Biden is like, what the hell? I mean, it's hard for me not to feel sorry for him because he looks like somebody who should be in an old folks home.
Oh, absolutely should, dude. Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
mean, I don't feel sorry for him because he's been such a
No, no,
crook his
you
whole
don't.
life. So
And the behind the Rosalind, I'm just stealing her, the man behind the curtain, but even like someone like Woodrow Wilson, who I despise, who I blame for so much. I mean, even I on his deathbed, he is that like I'm sure you know the quote, like how I worry I sold my country to a few men
mhm,
or whatever. And so even like, so people again, I'm just saying this, that just ever like democracies or republics, they're made, this is why they're installed,
mhm,
because you
yeah,
can't it's so easy to, I mean, they just those power players in that election, they threw in Teddy Roosevelt, who was already, he was a horrible president, but they threw in Teddy Roosevelt to pull the vote away from, I forget who was with the Bull Moose party, to get Wilson in. And
mhm,
Wilson with Baruch and all these, Catherine Graham's father was close to that board, the Washington Post original owner. It's like literally, I can't, I wonder when the Republic ever was a truly, maybe the first few presidents, but after that, I think that's what the goal is of a republic. It's,
yeah.
you can have people behind the scenes pulling every single string.
Yeah, even if you look at the Society of Cincinnati, with George Washington, it was kind of like these his friends from the Revolutionary War, and it was supposed to be just like on the outside they said it's just a way to kind of like honor these guys and take care of their widows and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But it was also a lot of these guys were Knights of Malta, and they were landowners, and they were well to do, and a lot of them were foreigners too. But so I feel like you had like the Federalists and then the Anti-Federalists. And the Anti-Federalists, their beef was that the Federalists were making the decisions that they would benefit from. So they were kind of anti the constant the ratification of the Constitution and stuff like
Yeah.
that. And I get both sides of that whole thing, but it kind of was true in a way. I mean, the people who control the government are going to think, no matter how good they are, for the most part, they're going to do things that makes them wealthier, their family wealthier. It's just
Right.
human nature.
It's huge. Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
is it truly a republic if you have, your representatives are being bought off, left and right by foreign governments and large companies and bankers and stuff like that, and their children are being given all these gifts, jobs or whatever. Is that really a republic? And is democracy really a democracy when you look at Edward Bernays' writings back in 1928, and he's saying that we knew how to control the public then
Oh
through
yeah.
propaganda. That's not democracy.
No.
It's
And I bet it was even
farce.
easier back then, to be honest. I
Oh yeah,
imagine, I think less resources. Well, and
yes,
it's like a meme, but I forget what year it was. Just like how you're talking memes on our phones. But
yeah,
it was in California not that long ago, 2001, I don't know, 1998. They voted for this immigration bill. I'm like kind of looking for it as I'm talking for it, but it was shot down. The people of California did not want more immigration, and judge of hmm, a judge, she declared that unconstitutional, and that opened the floodgates of immigration into California. That was the beginning of the end of a red California. It might have been 90, maybe even the 90s. But I just found that fascinating, dude. It's like, so how, and that's why I always love the CNN or whoever, like democracy dies in darkness. Dude, that's democracy.
yeah,
What's democratic about that? the majority of the people voted no, but you passed it anyway. So what
Yeah,
does it matter? What does it
ex
matter?
exactly. It's just an illusion, man. It's
Yeah.
only an illusion, and, whether it's democracy or republic, I mean, democracy, of course, is the big one because like you said, that you hear that constantly on the left for the most part, but even in the right a little bit. And that's the name of when they go over and topple another country's, government and move in the IMF and the World Bank. It's all about democracy, so
Oh.
it's such a farce.
Well, yeah. Well, we can so thank you for that. That was a good you definitely I learned more about the Fabians, dude. So you're about to become a Fabian expert, man. So
Thank
when
you, man. Thank
whoever
you.
gets to have you on next, they're in for quite a treat, odd man.
I hope so. I left out some stuff, so
Oh,
maybe
good.
yeah.
Save the good stuff. So you guys he'll post when he's on the show next or doing the full thing. But I mean, where can they find you? All those good things.
Yeah, man. Thank you for having me once again. _ the odd man out on Twitter and Instagram, and in the in the profile you can find my link tree to all my other stuff, the podcast and everything else. So thank you.
Awesome, dude. Well, and guys, Thursday I'll finish my politics. I have like all my notes. I got like 1 page left. So if you're bored Thursday, it's we'll go into more again older opium trade, and I'm learning so much about the Thailand and Southeast Asia and just more government corrupt. It's just insane. It's insane. So but so you guys can I'll post about that later. So thanks to everyone in the chat, Flippy, Skeptic, Rosalind, all you guys. Thanks so much. And we'll talk soon, everybody. Peace.